Facilitating and leading teams. Lesson 8, Meeting Effectiveness Basics. How to improve meeting effectiveness. Most meetings have been driving me mad for years. You see, I'm a time freak. I hate to waste time. It's part of my industrial engineering roots. Time is money. If time is money, we're wasting a lot of it when it comes to getting maximum value from the time we invest in meetings. What percentage of the time that you spend in meetings is value added? And the issue is, I've been in good ones, I've been in efficient ones, and then I've been in bad ones, so I know the difference. Back in 2002, one of my monthly performance improvement articles for Industrial and Systems Engineer magazine focused on meeting effectiveness. My hope when I wrote the article was that by now, we would have resolved a lot of the concerns I and others had back then relative to meeting waste. Believe it or not, many of us had spent years trying to get people to simply go to meetings. So during the 80s, during the 90s, we weren't meeting that much. And so in the 80s, we started doing teams. The 90s, we're starting to meet more. In 1997, I get the chance to contribute to a USA Today newspaper article on meetings. And the article focused on both the increasing need for them and the huge losses of time and money that are attached to their ineffectiveness. My 3 sentences of contribution in that article related to our practice of keeping meetings to a minimum at the freight carrier I was employed with. I also managed to squeeze in a mention of the microanalysis process I used to help determine where we were having problems with our meetings. By the time I wrote the Industrial and Systems Engineer magazine article in 2002, we were having too many meetings in most, if not all, of our organizations. Worse yet, the percent wasted time rate was continuing to climb. Fast forward to the present day. How much has changed? Almost 30 years later, over 20 years later. Are we still having too many meetings? Are our virtual meetings any better than our face-to-face meetings used to be? What percent of the time that you invest in meetings is wasted? What are some better ways you could use that time if we could get it back? Why people don't like meetings. Perhaps you're different. Perhaps you like going to meetings. I used to not avoid them as much as I do now, but maybe they were run a little more effectively back in the day. If you cringe like I do when someone suggests we need to have a meeting to talk about it, you probably have your reasons for disliking meetings a little more than you used to as well. Why do you not like going to meetings? There's a high likelihood that your answer's contained in the list I provided here. Number 1, we meet for the sake of meeting. It's often the case that meetings exist only because that is the way we've always done it. Tradition. Every department has to have a meeting every week, right? Number 2, group dynamics are not managed. A lot of meeting waste occurs because we fail to manage how people behave in meetings, such as how well we follow an agenda, how well we treat each other. And that drags out meeting time. It means we have to have more meetings to achieve the same goal. Number 3, agendas are non-existent, not time-based, or not followed. A significant number of teams don't use agendas at all. Even more teams fail to use time-based agendas to help stay on topic. Only the good teams have time-based agendas and use process checks by anyone on the team to make sure they stay on track. Now, they're not militaristic about it, but we just don't want to go off on tangents and be crazy about time waste. Number 4, face time is wasted reading to or lecturing people. We often waste meeting time reading to each other because we can't count on people reading the materials ahead of time, which is kind of sad for managers that make that much money. And with today's technology, which makes it very easy to both e-sign or even have people answer questions on the material to verify they looked at it. Easy tech. Next, poor facilitation skills are used to engage the group. We've already talked about that, but if a high percentage of the group only participates in the meeting by listening, why are they there? They could have just read the minutes or watched the video. Seriously, think about where your threshold's going to be. If a person's going to only talk 2 or 3 times in an hour, do they have to be in the meeting? How else could they better use their time? We do not have an unboundless amount of time to use, and any time we waste takes away from improvement time. Whether it's training time or research and development time, process improvement time, anything to make value stream better or support processes better, we're wasting it. Decisions are based largely on opinion. They're not fact-based. Opinion-based decisions often lead to less than desirable results. In turn, the time spent analyzing and making such choices is lost. Too much time is spent reading to people, and we really do not want to do that. But even worse, we spend too much time in defensive routines and too little time on decision making. Meetings often go off on track as people get caught up in debates that are more defensive versus decisive in nature. People don't do their between meeting work. In addition to not reading their pre-work, some team members fail to do other prep work that also has to be completed, and they wait to try to do it in the meeting instead. And that is just not a very nice practice. Trend shaping meeting effectiveness. And these are some important trends because we behave so much like tech hasn't emerged into our lives as much as it has in the last 10 or 15 years. And meetings should change dramatically given what we can share in other forums now. The internet makes most general information easy to find. Webinars and podcasts are easy to do to address lecture needs. Traveling to meeting reduces productivity and affects the carbon footprint of your organization. There's so much you can accomplish on virtual calls, and that technology continues to improve. Emails and texts often fail to effectively convey a message, and so videos, webinars, podcasts are often better. But we still have to use those facilitation and group dynamic skills that are most likely atrophying. They're not as sharp as they used to be in most organizations. I've been attending meetings in the workplace for over 40 years. When I first entered the business world, meetings were not the norm. In fact, I can easily remember times when we almost had to force or beg people to come to meetings. Participation in the workplace did not become more common until the latter 1980s. Now, however, many people wish we would go back to those times when meetings did not take up most of their day. 7 trends that shape the need for and effectiveness of meetings are on this visual. I just went over those. First and foremost, technology has affected both meeting types and meeting frequency. When one doesn't have to physically go to a location, it's easier to hold a meeting, but we can get carried away with that. When we can see everyone's work schedule on a screen at one time and schedule people into meetings, it's not nearly as difficult to find a time when everyone is available. But again, we don't want to go crazy with that. Some companies even allow scheduling people into meetings without asking them first, which to a boomer like me, that's rude, as long as their schedule shows that they're not in another meeting. Oh, it's a dangerous game to play. Technology, including the internet, has also made it easier to share and access information. Good or bad, this capability gives us more to talk about in meetings. Could take us off track in meetings. Unfortunately, technology has yet to begun to make meetings more effective, but it's coming. We're going to have Alexa-type devices that will help us manage agenda adherence, team member emotion levels, and conflicting group dynamics. Yes, the Alexa devices can sense when emotions are going up in the room by temperature or tone of voice or volume of voice. They can sense by the more rapid exchange between people that perhaps group dynamics are becoming an issue. And if you plug the time for the agenda items in there, Alexa will let you know if you're staying on track or not. So that's coming soon. Remote meeting participation has also become commonplace. If we're not careful, however, these Zoom calls or Microsoft Teams calls can be even less value added than face-to-face meetings are. We use the same techniques to improve meeting effectiveness, however, so that's key to know. Effective facilitation skill use simply involves a new set of challenges. when it's harder to observe all your team members. And that's the biggest challenge is, one, do we make people have their cameras on? Two, do we let people multitask or not? And see, now we're getting into, why are you even there? Well, you need to hear this. Well, do you need to hear it live? Do I need to hear it with my eyes focused? I mean, we need to be serious about this because we have limited time, because work-life balance is so key. Unfortunately, our group dynamics management skills are atrophying as these new technologies plus texting become more commonplace. And think about it, folks, you have people sending texts back and forth that others in the meetings can't see, and so that can even get wonky. Younger team leaders and members may not have even heard of group dynamics, let alone been taught techniques for managing group behaviors. And it can just make for a nightmare. Additionally, traveling to meetings reduces cognitive performance, increases carbon footprint, and it also just drives down meeting effectiveness. How have you seen emerging technologies impact meeting outcomes? Who's got the time? How many hours per month do you spend in meetings? How many hours per week do you spend in meetings? Typically, the further up in an organization you go, you'll find people spending a higher percentage of their time in meetings. Meeting waste levels can be as high as 50% or more. Ironically, wage rates also tend to increase as one goes higher up the org chart. If this is the case, think of the current waste potential. Think about how big that waste stream is. Better yet, think of the savings that could be gained. What else could we do with that time if each of your leaders practice effective meeting management? So here's some key meeting effectiveness questions. First of all, what percent of your weekly hours do you spend in meetings? Second, what percent of each meeting's time is value added? If you quit doing it, the customer would notice. Question 3, what is the monthly cost of your meeting waste? And then question 4, how many meetings do we actually need to support goal achievement?